Due to asbestos in the BBC canteen, this podcast was recorded entirely on location. While we've endeavoured to clean up the sound, you may hear the odd murmur, bustle or bang in the background, but hopefully this doesn't distract from you enjoying the episode.
Too hot for TV.
Welcome back to Doctor Who Too Hot for TV. We have a podcast that looks at all things Doctor Who Extended Universe. Today, once again, I'm joined by Liam. Liam, how are you?
I'm all right. I'm in my Henry Crab incarnation today. I'm good. I've put on a bit of weight, but that's just a hernia operation. We're all right. It's all good. I can carry it off.
So we're going to take another trip back into the wilderness. So probably 1990, I'd say. Well, a sort of 89, 90 and 91.
A sidestep 1990.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we're going to look at an old article from DWM and then a very recent, but also not so recent, Finnish audio. Why don't you tell the people what that is?
So, guys, I've encouraged and cajoled, nay, seduced your host today to join me for a sideways trip back to 1990 by virtue of 1997 and an issue of Doctor Who magazine that I picked up at Longleat 97.
Oh, what an adventure.
A halcyon day, which I now Dylan will probably correct me in the show notes if I'm wrong here, but I think it was 255.
It was.
And it is Dave Owen's seminal What If article about the fictional history of the show having survived survival on the 6th of December 89.
Absolutely. And then the big Finnish audio we're covering.
The current, you can buy it now, folks, from Mr. Mukherjee, the currently just released audio of what would have been potentially Sylvester McCoy's final story, Alixion.
Excellent. So, What If, as you said, was printed in DWM 255 and released on the 27th of August 1997. It was written by Dave Owen, and the artist was Phil Bevan.
God bless him.
News at the time, the Ice Warriors would be getting a VHS release with a 45-minute documentary on missing episodes. I think that was only 30 in the end.
Yeah.
DWM, always hot on the heels of new technology, was launching a teletext service on UK Gold, and Virgin Publishing were selling off their full-size Dalek that they used to send to signing events because they no longer had a license.
What did they name it? Was it named after Peter Darvel Evans?
Was it?
I don't know. I just made that up.
Peter Dalek Evans.
Peter Dalek. You heard it here. There you go. Yeah. He's just trademarked that in the corner.
Other releases at the time from BBC Books, we had The Body Snatchers featuring the 8th Doctor and Sam, and The Ultimate Treasure featuring the 5th Doctor and Perry. We also had from Virgin the Bernie Summerfield new adventure Ship of Fools, and the comic strip was Fire and Brimstone featuring the 8th Doctor and Izzy.
And the Spider Daleks.
Well, yes, quite. So
it all comes back to Leakley. It fucking all comes back to Leakley.
All roads lead to Leakley. So this article, what is it?
So this is, and it came really out of left field. I mean, I suppose if we, joking aside, which is a difficult thing for me to do, but joking aside, looking at this was about a year after the TV movie kind of collapsed and died. And I suppose at this point, DWM, like most branches of the show, was looking at perpetuating its existence by kind of looking at different kind of creative avenues and expressions of the show. So out of nowhere, we get this article from Dave Owen, which is a fictionalized account, complete with fucking Radio Times press clippings about the show from the point of Survival Part 3 all the way through to, spoiler alert, its eventual cancellation in 1991. Now, I love this because, as with all things, yes, it's a fictionalized retelling. Dave Owen takes a couple of, liberties in terms of imagining what would have happened at the time, the appointees, the people involved. But the actual crux of it is based in what probably would have happened in about 1990, 1991. More or less, with some diversionary avenues.
We get the article, don't we, afterwards?
Yeah.
Sort of, it talks to all the people involved and it sheds a bit more fact on
why that has been written the way it has been. Yeah.
Which isn't necessarily to say that they were all going to get commissioned.
Yeah.
Or all the stories would have been like.
Yeah, of course.
But it goes, this is why this person is in the running. Although very fondly, David A. McKinty says he was in the running. And
Andrew Cartmel said it most certainly was not.
He basically goes, yeah, I think I remember that.
It was on it was in the in tray.
I think it's one of those things, though, with a lot of commissions for lost stories and rumours of lost stories. Just because somebody's wrote something
doesn't necessarily mean it's going to come.
Yeah,
exactly.
It could very well be an unsolicited submission from someone who worked on the show before, never has. And because it ended up in an in tray, it ended up in a file somewhere, and it suddenly becomes this mythical lost story when actually it probably wasn't even read or was just rejected out.
I think those Doctor Who fans, especially now, and history repeats, by the time this episode drops, we'll have been a good 6-7 months after our one night stand with Omega the dog. And, reality is, we discussed it when we did an episode on that very eve. And, the reality of it is setting in that the television landscape is evolving. And it's at a point where it's probably not financially conducive to do Doctor Who at this moment in time.
Yeah.
And that's no reflection on the brand. It's a reflection on the larger television landscape.
Yeah.
And I think that is, interestingly, it's part of the reason why I suggested today we have a look at this, because it kind of mirrors what we're doing here back in 1997, looking at that. Because, time and history, they do repeat themselves.
So what stories do we get here? What do we like the sound of?
We've got some, and I have prepared some notes, and as you would expect, but we have what I call the core four. Julian, Dick and Anne, George and Timmy the dog. Love you, Gary Russell. But we have what we pretty much historically acknowledged would have been our core four stories of season 27. Slight divergence for when Big Finish did their adaptations in the early 2010s. But those are Earth-Aid, Ice Time, Crime of the Century, and Alixion.
Well, quite.
And what I find quite interesting with this, and also watching the superb Endgame documentary on the Survival DVD, is that as with most of history and how Doctor Who as a brand, naturally, for being around for 60 plus years, is going to repeat itself, so many, I'm not talking about ideas, I'm talking about moments and iconography, so many moments that Dave Owen has predicated here in this article have taken a form and come to be. There is a bit in Earth-Aid, in the first version of Earth-Aid, which, as you know, people that would listen to it would know this isn't in the actual audio version. In the original Earth-Aid here, Dave Owen postulates that the Doctor has built Stonehenge to send a signal into space. We've seen that with Matt Smith's Doctor. Ace makes a departure on a canal towpath, as then observed by the Time Lords. Very Tree Doctors. And we've seen several versions of that since. What I was quite interested in is the small kind of contextualizations that Dave Owen makes upon what was going on with the TV landscape at the time. So Crime of the Century, which would have been the third story of the season, that introduced Ace's successor, which Dave postulates would have been played by Julia Sawalliwer, who I recall Stephen Moffat in the article did say that she had made an offhand comment about being invited to an audition. So there was tentative steps being made in the fall of 89 to prepare for a life after Sophie Aldred's departure. And in Crime of the Century, it's described as being an Alan Waring directed, very similar vein to Edge of Darkness. Now, Edge of Darkness, the amazing Bob Peck, Joanne Whalley production of mid-80s that was preoccupied with environmentalism and nuclear power. And you can certainly see, and what I was fascinated about is that Crime of the Century, and this is borne out with what Andrew Cartmel talks about, is being set up not just as a story in its own right, but it's being described as a genesis point to establish a base of operations for the characters, financially again, that would save money for future iterations of the show, to carry it into the 1990s. So whereas in 70, we had Unit HQ, we had Courtney, Levine and Franklin. And here we're looking at Katie Tullinger, which is our new companion, and her slightly reformed, slightly gangstery leaning father, Sam Tollinger,
which would be played as a new brigadier.
They do, as played by the fantastic Tom Georgeson. And again, looking at this contextually, a few years before Heath reached amazing success in Neil Pearson's Between the Lines.
I mean, none of these things are facts.
No.
This is him sort of speaking to the writers and going, who would you quite like in that?
Absolutely.
But certainly the first three, Ice Time, Crime of the Century, and what was the
Earth Aid, yeah.
And Earth Aid are ones that keep coming up again and again, and what ultimately made us audios. While there was nothing commissioned for any of them, these were ideas they'd had in the pub, sitting down. Like, it was the genesis of an idea for a season.
I think that, we're looking at effectively, if we have to, as Doctor Who fans, we have a predilection for kind of romanticizing and elaborating these stories until they almost become urban myths, Yeah. But I think realistically, we're looking at story, meetings in a coffee shop, meetings in a restaurant, meetings at people's houses in the fall of '89, brainstorming ideas and saying, okay, we've got an open road here. We've got a lead departing. John's not coming back for another year.
Yeah.
We're going to have to create a basis that is going to carry this show for another decade. Let's look at our constructs. Let's look at our main characters. Where are we going to take this character that's going to assure its longevity for another decade? And I think that the idea of having a companion whose father is a slightly morally complex and morally dubious character, and having their mansion / extended family / dodgy leanings as a substitute for the narrative contrivances we get from a unit story, I think that's brilliant.
Yeah.
So many stories in unit we have where we say things like, oh, the Brigadier will get us into here with access clearance, because it's a narrative shortcut.
Yeah.
Sam Tollinger's network of gangland connections will get the 8th Doctor, Richard Griffiths, into a skyscraper because he's got the connections to do so. That's very 1990. It's very Bugs. It's very Jesse Birdsall and Clayton McLaughlin. You can see it in that aesthetic,
So the fourth script, Alixion, was commissioned.
It was actually originally commissioned for season 26.
It was an overrun. It was a spare just in case something fell
through. It's very unlike a lot of McCoys in so much as, especially the latter McCoys, and I think one of season 26's strengths is it never leaves really Earth, apart from the planet of the Cheetah People, which, let's be brutally honest, is Earth by an other name in terms of its realization. And I think that Alixion really, as much as I love the constructs of it, and a lot of the narrative themes and contrivances in it have been revisited in subsequent Who stories, most namely Tooth and Claw and Orphan 55. Shout out for my main man, 13th Doctor Stan Big D. But that the realization for that from a BBC in 1990 that is somewhat afraid of doing something even 5 years into the future. It would be a lot of overlit, gaudy corridors. And probably 2 days of location filming at Chislehurst Caves.
It's interesting, isn't it, that the idea that this was a regeneration story, obviously it wasn't written as that, but then in this article is the one that makes it and goes, perhaps this is the one we'll use as the...
And I looked at it and it's interesting comparing it to the recent audio adaptation, which we'll get into, but this version of Alixion very much feels to me, it's not a Logopolis. Logopolis is, I'm using this as an example, based around the idea of death and decay and entropy. It's about death. It's about realization. And that's borne out in things like the death of the radio technician in the Pharos Project, all the way to Nyssa watching her galaxy burn. The Caves of Androzani is a tragedy. It's a Jacobean tragedy. Alixion is that for the 7th Doctor. The whole point is that he is tormented by voices and decisions and memories from the past. And when you have a Machiavellian character that starts off as a bumbling fool and by the end is making decisions that are going to change the cost of people's lives, this naturally is extrapolating to this point. So in that context, I think Alixion very much is a narrative, apotheosis of the way that trajectory of character is going.
Yeah. What's interesting as well is they describe it in the article as a bit of a send-up of the show.
Yeah.
Which is not something you get in the audio.
No, absolutely not. The audio is very much, if anything, it's a satirizing of the genres that the show uses, not the show itself. So it plays with your preconception. So, you have that original, very heavily overlit, very gaudy, very kind of BBC set dressing, holiday camp, holiday spa / relaxation resort. And gradually you're peeling back the layers to see that there is something nasty underneath. It's very much a metaphor of McCoy's era. As you're doing that with the show, you're doing that with the character, and you're saying, well, no, if you are 900 plus years into a role, from a narrative construct, this character is, and I've always looked at that as the Seventh Doctor, literally saying, well, no, I've been fucked about with, and the way I'm dealing, if I'm going out and doing something, if I'm out on the pull and I'm trying to get a certain type of person and it ain't fucking working, after 900 years, man's going to rethink his strategy. You're going to think this pickup line ain't working, man. Yeah. And it's a version narratively of that. And I think from that perspective, the fact that it is Katie Tullinger's first adventure with a new Doctor makes it very mirrored kind of in terms of Androzani. Because it is tragic. It is about two people who don't even know each other very well.
One of whom is going to go mad.
Yeah. And absolutely. And seeing as you brought us to that point, Dave Owen doing a remarkable thing, which has never even been done since, which is the fact that this incarnation of the Doctor needs to regenerate because their mind has been irretrievably damaged, not their body.
Yeah.
He describes McCoy's straitjacketed, mute farewell to the role, which probably would have pleased quite a few BBC executives because they didn't want him to speak in the TV movie at all, Joe Wright included. And they said incredibly moving. You've got a Doctor that has waged a war with minds, in the mind, against his opponent's minds, and effectively lost.
Yeah.
And then this is where the article gets really interesting, because it then postulates that due to the BBC Broadcasting Act of 1990, which as we know is all real life fact, and having to farm stuff out to independent companies, that Doctor Who took a hiatus after the success of season 27 and was relaunched in, I believe, the spring of 1991.
What a time that would have been.
Well, this would have been our bogs with Richard Griffiths as 8th Doctor.
And Ian Fraser as the producer.
And now that, I've always looked at that, and at the time I was kind of like, what the fuck is this? In terms of it's just a name on the credits. But you look at it and you watch Endgame, and you see interviews with people like, one of my strong memories of that was Colin Brake doing an interview with that and saying that he was called into a regular staff review meeting with Peter Cragine, his head of department, when Colin was working as a script editor on EastEnders. And Peter Cragine asks the EastEnders script editor, Colin, who should be the next producer of Doctor Who? Because nobody knew what to fucking do with it when John had gone.
But also, they pick Ian Fraser, and he wasn't in the running.
Yeah.
But what John Nathan Turner says in the article is Graham Williams, Philip Hinchcliffe, and himself, none of them had ever produced television before when they got the job.
Yeah.
So it sort of makes sense.
Well, that's how you were getting, that was the thing back then, wasn't it? You were getting PUMs that were coming up and being given the opportunity. That's why Graham MacDonald gave that to John HANT. We spoke about that before. And, that was John's opportunity to prove himself. And that's why for that first season he had Barry Letts as kind of the ghost of Christmas past overlooking his shoulder.
Andrew Cartmel also goes, I'd want to increase the run to 20 episodes.
Yeah.
Obviously, he wouldn't have had that call. He doesn't
know. And I think they kind of run with that. But I think the interesting thing about that is it shows that it cautiously kind of moves us towards 21st century iteration of Who, in the fact that they were looking to do more stories, but shorter stories and shorter. So you would have had maybe 6-7 stories of 2-3 episodes each. Well, that's not totally dissimilar from a world of things like Stolen Earth to Journey's End with Turn Left and Utopia, The Sound of Drums. I found it very interesting. And again, art mirroring life, that they chose to open the 8th Doctor, Richard Griffiths' first season in media res with new script editor Ben Aranovich and his story, The Last of the Daleks. And the idea with that was, and Dave Owen quite openly says, this was never on the table in reality. It was the fact that you're dealing with a show that has been away for 18 months. You've got a new character. You've moved time on somewhat. You want to show a growth in the relationship between Katie and the Doctor. What else are you going to fucking relaunch it with? The Garm.
Yeah.
Nobody's tuning in to watch Last of Arato.
No, and quite rightly, they're not going to do a TV movie and have a post.
Absolutely.
It's like time has moved on. Richard Griffiths as the Doctor. What do we think of that?
Well, unless we're somebody's got, like, slipping Bruce Robinson a fiver and we're working our way through the principal characters of Withnail and I. Do you know what? I think that, I mean, we're dealing with, in our world, Griffiths, I think Pie in the Sky started in 1991. So we are dealing with I mean, he's not a leading man, but he's a stalwart English character actor. I think you'd have had a tenor and a flavour of the show. Personality-wise, maybe a cross between Pertwee and Troughton. I see a lot of, everyone goes on about, because Henry Crabb, by virtue of the character, is very cantankerous. But I think with Griffiths, I met Griffiths in the latter days of his life. He did a wonderful play with Danny Devoy at the Savoy Theatre called The Sunshine Boys. And even then, unless you put Harry Potter in front of him to sign, he fucking hated Potter. He fucking hated Potter. Anyway, we digress. But Richard Griffiths was a sparkly and mischievous-eyed man. He did have, he had a cantankerous streak. I'm not going to deny that. I saw him shout at people who asked him to sign a wand. That's not a euphemism. But you could tell he enjoyed the arts and he enjoyed being on stage. He enjoyed what he did. I think he would have brought a mischief to the character and a bit of gravitas. And as much as I disagree with the preconception, there are elements and quarters of Her Majesty's Press and Charles Catchhole in 1989 who would have said that McCoy was too light an actor for the role. I don't believe that. I think that he showed that he had the range to do it. But as much as I adore Sylve, I adore Sylve, and I think he works best in your quiet, contemplative, reflective speeches, like in Ghostlight, when he's talking about burnt toast, in Battlefield, when he's talking with, Peter Wormsley and James Ellis. When you ask him to start shouting on a Perryrail street to Catherine Bidmead, not so much.
Absolutely.
But Griffiths can balance that light and dark.
I think Griffiths would have been great.
Yeah, I agree.
I do question casting some, and people aren't like this, but casting somebody of his size in the role, because Doctor Who's got to do a lot of running.
Yeah, I mean,
people go, oh, well, William Hartnell didn't do any running. William Hartnell didn't do any fucking running because he was in a tiny studio.
No, the set did the fucking running. Hartnell was standing on the spot. He was just jogging.
But I just don't know how you have a series that is action-led.
I've got 2 words for you, D.
Go on.
Sonic Segway.
Fair.
He's bigger on the inside, guys. So was Richard.
Although, and let's not jump too deep into this, but if you've got an actor who can't really run, you've got to think of more interesting ways to get him out of situation.
Well, I mean, we're looking at 1991 here. We're a couple of years away from Gillian Anderson as Dana Scully. I mean, I look at that and I think, does that show us that Katie Tullinger is going to be the leader of the show, and that and the Doctor Bailey would take more of a backer seat in terms of being like, would it be a more of a Pygmalion Henry, Eliza Doolittle relationship? Would it be a Higgins kind of dynamic? Would you be looking at him kind of egging her on, and she would be the creative action force of that? That could be an interesting dynamic. I think by necessity, if your leading man has got slightly restrictive mobility issues, then by necessity you write towards that and around it. You don't shirk from it, because by shirking from it, you're drawing attention to the issue.
Yeah.
And then we get into the range of stories that were planned for this season.
Now, first of which,
tell me,
Edward Young's Night Thoughts.
Yeah.
Now, I was told by multiple people when Night Thoughts came out and when I covered it on this, that Edward Young was an alias for a famous writer.
I did not know this.
I don't think that's true, because here his name is.
Did he not write? They do the audio adaptation of it in 2011 or something with
exactly.
Philip Olivier.
So here we are, sort of 14 years before that or whatever.
Yeah.
And the name's still Edward Young. And they say he was a sketch writer, blah, blah, blah. So I think that might be a bit of a fan myth.
Well, we like to puncture them here, don't we?
Well, indeed.
But Night Thoughts, I do, again, I'm very struck by it. And I was very aware when I read the article that this was one of the stories that didn't really have too much of a hook in it. It was much more abstract in terms of dreamscape iconography and kind of the kind of bit more Lovecraftian and dealing with that. Well, we both know that Lovecraft wouldn't be possible on a BBC budget in 1991.
No.
The reality of this is we'd probably had a skyscraper in Canary Wharf with Craig McLachlan and a couple of people having electrodes fitted to their heads going into cyberspace. That's just the nature of what we would have had at the time.
Absolutely.
But there's no denying it's a visually arresting story and a great audio story as well.
Really, genuinely creepy.
Yeah.
Then we get into Animal. Animal was ultimately adapted as season 26.
It was, and I don't think this was ever. I mean, I recall, if I recall correctly, I think Ben Aranovich just said to Andrew, by this point he would either have been an ex-script editor, or the kind of the remit of the show, if we're going, would have opened up slightly with more episodes. And I think that there would have come a point where they said, well, Andrew, you've never written one.
Yeah.
I mean, Eric Saywood was commissioning himself under Paula Moore and some lighting technician and Charles Catchpole every third week, Animal's interesting, but Animal feels like more of a passion project for Andrew Cartmel, more than a reflection of what would have been the message of the show at the time. But again, I like the idea that we're going to go back to Sam Salinger's base and examine more of Katie's world.
Absolutely.
And the fringe trappings of that. But and there, of course, we get on to Mr. McKinty.
Indeed. So McKinty was Avatar.
Oh, Avatar.
So
yes, indeed.
David A. McKinty's Avatar, which he describes as an Evil Dead body snatcher sort of thing.
Which, of course, is very, very easy to film on a BBC budget in 1991.
Well, Mike Tucker says in the article, he says, well, it would have been like Kane in Dragonfire.
Yeah.
Don't show any blood. You can show the rest of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was the rule at the time, wasn't it? You couldn't show actual secreting fluids, which, sorry guys, kind of rules out my social life. But
John Nathan Turner didn't pay any attention.
John Nathan Turner, God bless him, he was busy eating a pasty.
He was secreting fluids all over
the shop. But that was always the plan. But yeah, so I think it's very interesting. And they talk about potentially doing location filming somewhere like Cornwall. And again, I think that's got a whole different visual palette, because I do honestly believe, my abiding memory, when I look back and think of the Sylvester McCoy era, I don't think of a shit studio which is overlit like, sadly, most of the Colin Baker eras. I think of a country lane in Sunset or in summer with Sylvan Soph running into the bushes while people throw sparkly ray guns at them in the middle, jumping on a motorcycle or, and it's all brilliant daylight and it's all locations and it's wonderful English countryside. And I think that's one of the takeaways of the year, and it's what I love about it. So if we could take that and turn it and do night shooting and kind of make it a visually creepy analogous version of that, why not?
Yeah. Mike Tucker and Robert Perry's Illegal
Alien. Now Mike, I spoke to Mike last week at, shout out here, the BFI screening of Zygons. I've just reread Illegal Alien recently.
Oh, really? How was it?
Do you know what? Fuck me, it held up really well.
Oh, brilliant.
Really well. Although, I couldn't help but think, there's a certain policeman character in it, guys. If you've read it, you know what I mean. I couldn't stop but thinking of fucking Reg Deadman from Goodnight Sweetheart. I kept thinking that fucking Gary Sparrow was going to appear around the corner and proposition Sophie Aldred. Because he was always fucking doing that.
So this was a spec script that they wrote 2 of the 3 episodes or 3 of the 4 and then an outline for the other. They submitted it under a false name because they didn't.
I can even tell you, because hypothetically, guys, I might have used this alias in a hotel a few times. It was submitted under Robert Perry and Greg Ashby. Now, if you ever see Greg Ashby at a Doctor Who convention, guys, you know where I am in the bar.
A Cyberman story set in World War
the Blitz,
II.
Mostly at night, he said. Yeah. I think Mike described it visually. He kind of thought of the colour palette of it as being very reminiscent of An Empty Child. All night, blitz flares, bombing raids. I mean, you could just imagine that kind of how that would work out, don't you?
I redesigned Cybermen, hopefully, that he would have done himself.
Absolutely. And there's some sketches that Mike had done contemporaneous of 1997, which, to go into one of my personal jams here, and this is a field I'll quite happily die on, remind me tremendously of the 1993 Jim Henson animatronic Chris Fitzgerald Cyberman from New Dimension, which I still to this day think is one of the most creepy realizations of the form, because it's monstrous. It's elongated hands and it's deformed kind of features. It is a human edifice, kind of twisted and molded, and it's wonderful. And that sort of thing, for horror reasons, I think is absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Absolutely.
So I think it would have been a standout. I think it probably would have topped the DWM poll.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, a real shame that one never made it to the screen. But
absolutely,
we've got the book. Then we've got Tony
Etchell.
School for Glory.
Now, this was described as being very kind of nightmarish, almost Orwellian in terms of how it kind of it explored the horror of war. Now, but they go to great pains in the article and in the interviews afterwards to say this would be a very different exploration of warfare and conflict than Curse of Fenric.
Yeah,
this is going to be about the kind of the mental training that the whole young generation has gone through to prepare themselves for the tragedy and the horrors of conflict, and about how you're twisting and molding these young minds to make them ready for unimaginable conflict and the evil forces that prey within that. Yeah. Again, very reminiscent and mirroring the twisting of young minds with propaganda of the 1914 and 1920s.
Yeah. And a very interesting thing that they said it would have appeared to have been a straight historical to start with.
Yeah.
For a couple of episodes.
But when was the last time we had that at this point in the program?
But ultimately there would have been a sci-fi twist at the end of it.
Yeah.
And we get Hostage by Neil Penswick,
our author of the, let's be honest here, guys, one of the all-time famous, the only new adventure to feature a creature with 3 breasts on the cover, The Pit.
And he described this as a bit like Predator.
Which, of course, is very achievable when you're filming The Sunshine Club and you've got a limited budget in 1990.
It's an intriguing layout of a series.
It is.
I don't know how many of them would have materialized, what they would have looked like, how much of it was achievable, but it feels more achievable than some of the stuff in Trial or Time Lash or something like that.
I mean, Dylan, we have to look at this with a slightly rose-tinted spectacles, and it's an alternative reality. Although, being the slightly kind of caustic, paranoid, miserable old fucker that I am, I did think there was something quite entertaining about the fact that Dave Owen postulates that the series would have come to an ignominious conclusion after this season 28 with the transmission of the last story, Network, which is a story featuring the return of the Rani, an old foe, some artificial intelligence, and a hastily contrived ending with a last line that didn't really work. Thank goodness we never had that in our actual reality.
Network, I think, is the only one where it's completely made up, right?
Absolutely. And Dave Owen does go to that effort saying, and as of course, we all know that the Eighth Doctor's final words in this universe are, nothing lasts forever.
Oh, of course. No, so it's the opening story and the final story that have been
that
are absolutely pure works of fiction.
Yeah. Last of the Daleks and Network.
We obviously get a version of season 27 many years later.
We do. And I felt personally betrayed by the fact that Ace never left.
I felt betrayed by all of it. It just wasn't.
No, it wasn't.
It just wasn't as good as this article promised. Now, that's a certain amount of weight of expectation.
Absolutely. And you and I, and it's the same with anything. If you and I found out tomorrow that the BBC had decided to fill the next 10-year interregnum by making a new version of Dark Dimension with Chris, all the boys through to shoots.
Yeah.
Again, we'd feel personally betrayed and we'd wonder where the fuck Rick Mail was. And the fact that he's been deceased for several years is not an excuse.
But you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't. Because in one way, if you do it exactly like you told everybody, you go, well, I know all this. And then you do it differently. Everybody goes, but what about the stuff you said you were going to do?
But I think it's hard to underestimate, especially for me, just how mind-blowing this was in 97.
Oh, yeah.
Because, we'd heard rumours. There were tiny throwaway mentions and bits in DWB, and Gary Lee had kind of insinuated a couple of things here and there. But to kind of see an entire fictionalized retelling of McCoy's farewell and a further era of the show was absolutely fascinating to me,
Yeah, absolutely. We must talk about the art. So,
well, Phil Bevan. Now, for your listeners and people that, follow my artwork, I'm firmly of the belief. Now, my personal DW artist inspiration, and one of the people that kind of got me into my style of drawing is Alistair Pearson. So I very much go into the photorealistic side of it. But God bless Phil Bevan, because whilst he captures likenesses beautifully, there's something very trippy and very almost psychedelic about his illustrations. And it's a tragedy that he died so young, because what a talent he was. And I think so many modern fans today have no idea about how much of the visual imprint of Phil Bevan shaped the wilderness era in the 1990s.
Absolutely.
Every single month in DWM, we had a prelude to that month's new adventure, and it was a Phil Bevan illustration. And they were absolutely amazing in some of the visualizations. And shout out to David J. Howe's book, The Who Adventures, which reprinted loads of those.
Yeah. And there is a full book from Telos Publishing of Bevan's work,
Lovely.
which is really good. It's all his covers for Jeremy Bentham's fanzine, which name escapes me. And of course, you talk about the wilderness stuff.
Absolutely.
He also did the DWB article.
Yeah.
Or no, the DWM article about the man who owned Doctor Who, Philip Beagle.
He did.
And he illustrated this ginormous TARDIS.
Yeah.
Again, a bigger TARDIS than we got in the TV.
Absolutely. And it was more impressive than, I mean, I love the TV movie TARDIS, but this reminded me very much of the Galactic Observation Room from Star Trek Generations. It's fucking massive. It's like a celestial temple, you know. It's one of my personal favourite memories, and this says probably more about me than it does about Mr. Bevan, is a piece that he did for Caves of Androzani, where for some reason Shara's Jack is holding Nicola Bryan, and she might as well have no top on. It's basically, you know, it's veering dangerously close to...
It's some wishful thinking, isn't it?
Absolutely. You know, you can almost see Michael Kerrigan.
Is there anything else we want to say on this?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say to especially to fans of the extended universe and to people that are checking out the Lost Stories and to people that are potentially buying Alixion this month, I would definitely say that this article is seminal because it really, for me, and I'm very much of the opinion, I think, and I've always said this, this is a show about time travel. This is a show about a fantastic, you know, an alien with two hearts that travels through time in a phone box. I don't believe there's such thing as fucking canon. You know, every time that character lands on another world, what happened last week becomes null and void.
Agreed.
Because it's the butterfly effect. So, in my mind, the Eighth Doctor, Richard Griffiths, is no less canonical than Peter Cushing's Doctor Who, or the Fugitive Doctor, or Richard E. Grant's Schalker Doctor that Jonathan Groff likes to look at pictures of in his spaceship.
We need a charity anthology of the Griffiths.
We do.
Doctor.
Mr. Howe, are you listening? We need the Griffiths era unchained. It's great. Check it out, guys.
So this article, a clanger, a banger, or an average meander?
Oh, as Richard Griffiths would say, it's a pie in the banger.
A banger indeed.
A banger.
Too hot for TV.
Alixion, which I am today years old when I realised that the title is a play on the elixir of life. So there you go, guys.
This came from Big Finish Productions on the 16th of September 2025. It was recorded on the 26th and 28th of February 2025 at Soundhouse Studios. It was written by Robin Mukherjee, directed by David O'Mahony, and produced by David O'Mahony. News at the time: it was done because the brand's dead, the show's dead, it's all over.
But don't forget, guys, this was always the plan.
Other releases: we had Knights of the Round TARDIS featuring the first Doctor, Ian, Barbara and Susan from Big Finish. This was the unbanned thing. Also from Big Finish, we have The Last Queen of the Nile with the fourth Doctor, Leela and K9. Return of the Doctor with 13 and Yaz. Torchwood, Salvage. Master, Part 3 with the Eric Roberts Master. And Bernie Summerfield, The Dalek Eternity Volume 1. Plus, from BBC Audio, we had the audiobook of Doctor Who and the Loch Ness Monster. From BBC Books, we had Dracula featuring the first Doctor, Ian, Susan and Barbara. And the comic strip was his Mad Pranks featuring the 15th Doctor.
Too hot for TV.
The Doctor and Ace check into what seems to be a luxurious intergalactic health spa, but soon discover it's a facade for a monstrous Queen of the Hive entity that steals the Doctor's life force and manipulates his and Ace's memories and fears to expand her power across time and space. She probes into their guilt, regrets and secrets, trying to break them psychologically while siphoning off the Doctor's essence. Eventually, the Doctor resists her attacks, regains enough strength, and helped by Ace and other allies, overcomes the Queen, restoring both his and Ace's vitality.
Too hot for TV.
So, we talked about the story's history before. Let's give it a quick
percolate it.
Yeah,
Let's percolate it. Alixion was a story that was, as you probably just heard us discuss way back in the midst of 18 minutes ago, originally considered and actually helped as a holdover for season 26 in 1989. It was then considered to be the finale of season 27, had that gone. And it was a satirical exercise on both health spas, relaxation, and it was also a trip on, almost without getting too pretentious here, a Joseph Campbell Heart of Darkness exploration of what would have been the Seventh Doctor's final story, kind of unraveling his psyche with a group of heinously evil and amoral monks that were attempting to harvest the mind and elixir of a Time Lord that they could feed and feast upon.
Indeed.
Much like the crowd at NFT1.
How does this version of it differ?
This is, and even down to the cover design where you see McCoy in his light grey jacket, this is a story that is, and it reminds me very much of those Darren Morgan X-Files. It's a pause and it's a reflection of where the era has gone. Even to the extent where we have extended soundscapes, flashbacks of both the Doctor and Ace's past and memories and previous incidents in their lives coming back to haunt them.
Yeah.
It's a reflective, quite melancholic piece, and it looks at our characters and takes apart what makes them tick. Mukherjee is a tremendously talented writer in so much as that he's very good at character. He is expert at managing to unravel and unpick that dynamic. So by this point in the show, whereas in the original version, we would probably had the Seventh Doctor and his new companion for one of their first journeys out. This is literally a deconstruction of the Sylve and Soph dynamic. And what makes it especially poignant is that you can actually hear how much older they both are, which actually works to the benefit of this script.
The other thing I was struck by, because on one hand, it suffers from the weight of expectation of, we've read about this with Bob Monkhouse as again, Bob Monkhouse never cast.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was a Dave Owen creation, but man, what a great bit of casting that would have been.
But there is a world where Battlefield fell through. Curse of Fenric fell through, and then this was a McCoy and Aldred, not a regeneration story.
No.
And it ended up in that season. But what we sort of end up with is this bastardization that is neither the 26 version or the 27 version.
Very, very uncomfortably between two creative impetuses. The soundscape is very Kef.
Yeah.
The music is very Kef, and they've gone to great pains to, perhaps more than they do in a lot of kind of the contemporaneous Big Finish ranges and the extended stories. It sounds very 89. It's deliberately designed to evoke that era.
Yeah.
But the exploration of the dynamic of the two is done in a way that you wouldn't have seen on screen in 1990. In a weird way that, although I don't think it was as successful a piece on its own merit as these, Earthaid and Thin Ice of the Lost Stories of 2011 actually managed to evoke the 1990 tenor in so much as they don't really go into the dynamics.
Yeah.
It's much more surface, whereas this is much more psychologically based. And we both know that simply wouldn't have been on screen at 7:30 on a Wednesday night in 1990.
Does this version work?
It does, in so much as if you take it as an independent, almost sidestep story on its own merit. What I think is to its detriment is that, and I think Who works best when and one of the things I like most about the McCoy era is that you very rarely see the TARDIS. It's basically a means of arrival and departure.
Yeah.
You're lost in the narrative of the story, and the characters evolve and the story evolves in real time throughout that story. Battlefield takes place over 3-4 days. There's more TARDIS scenes in this story than there is in the entire fucking McCoy era. We keep going back to the TARDIS, that the Doctor goes at one point, Ace is being tortured by the heinously amoral sympathizer of the Beatles, and the Doctor, for reasons unknown, to unpick the various dilemmas of what's happened in the past, departs the narrative, and it completely deflates the tension of it.
Well, the cliffhanger twice is the TARDIS disappearing.
Yeah, and it's the same cliffhanger.
In fact, technically, isn't the first one as well, the TARDIS is gone?
Yeah.
Then it's the Doctor's gone with the TARDIS and Ace has gone with the TARDIS.
And again, that's good, but it kind of, it's like a magician's trick on a darkened stage. When you do that and when you play that conceit, you're reminding the viewer, nay, the listener, that you've just deflated the tension of the story because you've used your magician's box to take the character out of the narrative. So all of that tension of it, we can't escape from here. It's gone. We can't find it. Our means of escape. That's what is so potent about Androzani. Yeah. They're miles below the surface. The TARDIS is on the surface. and the narrative is just unraveling. Weirdly, actually, the TARDIS is the enemy of drama in this story. It destroys any tension that you would have.
Does it evoke any of the mysterious and apocryphal Cartmel master plan?
There's a pieces, I mean, I would say the latter 10, 15 minutes of part 2, as the Doctor and Ace are descending further and further into the catacombs below Alixion, with the massive soundscape of the descending memories and the Beeples themselves. I think that particular is very reminiscent of the kind of the sweat-drenched action sequences of latter season 26. The going into Arthur's kind of underwater spaceship, exploring the surface of the Channel of the Pleated people, going through the pipe tunnels in Femric where Wainwright makes his sacrifice. Those sort of things is very, very Cartmel master plan.
Yeah.
But I think it's actually to its detriment that this isn't a regeneration story, because I think the whole point of it is that you're having something to build towards. And by virtue of the fact that you're making this other holiday for the Doctor and Ace, I think strips it of that agency.
Yeah.
That's not to say that it's a bad story. Far from it. I think it's quite a taut written piece. But I think structurally it's uneven. And I don't think that works.
And it started life as a 3-part story, and here it's a 4-part.
Yeah.
Obviously,
and you can hear the creaking of the Beatles extending the narrative at times.
The problem for me is this feels a little bit too much just another mid-range Big Finish story. It doesn't even feel like a lost story. And I can understand why the season 27 audios didn't. But this one, the script fucking exists.
Yeah.
And maybe that's Big Finish wanting more. Maybe that's Robin wanting to do a bit of work.
I think it's more of a reflection of Robin Mukherjee as an author in 2025, looking back on what would have been one of his, or potentially his first television commission, and wanting to add a bit more of his contemporaneous voice to that story and showing where he's grown as an author, which is great and it's valid, but it's not necessarily what we would have had in 1990.
I'd prefer it warts and all, even if it was worse. When the script exists, like the script for Animal never existed, so it was it's an affectation essentially. It's I'm putting the characters in the mindset
Absolutely.
of 1990. But when a script for something like this exists, I kind of feel like they should stick to it. So I'm a little disappointed in the lost stories element of it.
Yeah, I think it sits uncomfortably between two creative visions of what it wants to be.
Yeah.
And I look at it and there are certain, and you can see, I mean, Mukherjee is a fan of the show. And I think you can see certain 2005 post influences and conceits on this story that have added to it and contextualized it in a way that wouldn't necessarily have worked in the narrative in 1989. There are elements of Orphan 55 in here. There are elements of Tooth and Claw in here. There are elements of Utopia in here. And that's not necessarily to their detriment, but it's kind of diluting the unique creative vision that was Alixion.
Yeah, you can't help but be influenced by the stuff
Absolutely
that's come since.
I mean, I adore the X-Files, and it's for the same reason that the first season of the X-Files is my favorite. Is because it's Chris Carter's on solid vision.
Yeah,
and that by the time you're dealing with a show that's a runaway success, Nace at Russell T Davies' Who in 2005, by necessity, it's got that public reaction is going to affect what you're creatively producing.
What does it do, or does it do anything interesting with the characters of the Doctor?
Yeah, I think it really unpicks their dynamic quite well, in a sense that there's very kind of almost kind of postmodern references. You know, Sophie and Ace keep making reference to, well, we never do this, we never take a holiday, and you know that. And even Robin himself has said that this is completely alien to the character of that Doctor and Ace, is that you know that they're constantly thirsting for adventure. You know, when they do take breaks, like in Silver Nemesis at the beginning, when the Doctor's checking his pocket watch and sees the comet ratifying, it feels forced, because you know that those characters are never at rest, even when they are at rest, so to speak. So I find that kind of works against it, but there is a melancholic edge to this, because maybe it's just due to the fact that, for my liking, you can hear that Sylv and Soph are so much older, but I think there's a slightly much more melancholic tone to it, and a reflective tone to it, which is much more Sylv and Soph looking back on their time in the show and how they've grown since 1990, as opposed to how we have listeners have grown in that time.
it's sort of built on the stuff they do in Ghostlight and Fenric, where we dip into both the Doctor and indeed Ace's past, and here's situations where they really didn't make the right call and made bad decisions. And I like that, and that feels very true to season 26.
Yeah.
And I wonder whether that's one of the elements that survives from the original.
Yeah, I mean, we actually hear Ace's mother in this, you know. I think that, and it's a very canny, very clever decision to literally externalize those. I mean, Ace's mother is a cipher that's existed in fandom for many years. You know, it's the catalyst for so much and so many elements of our character. And to have it kind of almost reduced to a haunting voice that's kind of a spectre, kind of haunting that character, I think is very clever, because you're effectively externalizing what is a lot of continuity and mythology in a way that acknowledges that this is what drives that character and this is how she's grown.
Absolutely.
So I think in that respect, it's very, very that's very nifty and very clever plotting from Mukherjee.
What about, in this particular version, the production values and the performances?
Well, on audio, I think the production values are absolutely amazing, because you can do Orphan 55 as directed by Tony Shalhoub, James Cameron, etc. All, you know, it's I mean, as I say, I think the soundscape of this is amazing. The haunting voices are very much reminds me of M.R. James's Ghost Story for Christmas. It reminds me very much of The Signalman. It reminds me very much of the various iterations of Christmas Carol, which I think it's deliberately designed to do, to kind of evoke those that mix of nostalgia and reflection as we grow older as people. I think the soundscape is great. I think the music and incidental music is fantastic, because it's so Kef McCulloch. It hurts, you know.
Especially the drums.
It couldn't be any more Kef McCulloch if you had a man on a keyboard frantically bashing away in a grotto somewhere in Kidderminster. So in that respect, it works beautifully.
Absolutely.
I think, it's a very accomplished audio production.
This is the first time I've heard McCoy sound really aged.
I was struck by that as well.
Especially in the first episode.
Yeah, when he's rolling his R's. I mean, maybe that's just because it's such a part of his real life persona that I know when I've encountered Sylv in various things, like yourself at conventions and various things. But that slightly kind of more seasoned, gravelly, honeyed indentation to his voice that's become of note post The Hobbit is now visibly audible.
Yeah.
And that adds a different tenor to the Seventh Doctor, which makes me quite sad, actually, that it isn't a kind of a regeneration story, because I think you could actually make that work to its betterment by doing so, but Celavi.
Absolutely. Do you have much more you want to say on this?
Yeah, I mean, it was a delight to finally kind of exorcise a story that's kind of been collectively hanging around in my psyche since I read that article in 1997. It wasn't what I expected it to be, but perhaps that's no bad thing.
Indeed.
I think that, as always with the best stories of Doctor Who, I think an element of confounding our expectations and not necessarily being what we expect it to be is never a bad thing, because it just shows the dexterity of the show's format. I think it was an interesting experiment. It's nice that Robin Mukherjee finally got to tell that tale. I can't help lamenting and feeling nostalgic for what might have been.
Indeed. I feel a little let down, but if this was Big Finish number 5, I think I would have enjoyed it a lot more. But it's just we've had these sorts of stories of this level for this TARDIS duo for a long, long time.
I mean, had this been released alongside the Genesis machine in 1998,
I think
with their voices sounding pretty much then, I think we'd be having a very different conversation right now.
Indeed. So is it a clanger, a banger, or an average meander?
Oh, see, my nostalgic heart would love to play this as a banger, but I would say this is an entertaining meander through the corridors of Alixion.
I've got to go average meander.
Yeah.
It's just, I think it would have felt quite fresh in 1990.
Yeah.
But now, unfortunately,
I think we've explored a lot of this territory.
I've heard it all before.
Yeah.
I've heard it all before.
Yeah.
So, I mean, an average meander for me.
And fuck it, Bob Monkhouse isn't here, so it's never going to be a banger, is it? You know what I mean?
Too hot for TV.
Well, thank you for joining.
Always a pleasure, sir.
If people want to find you on the internet, where can they find you?
So, as I've said, recited by note many, many times before, you can find me on Instagram. I frequent there as Artfully Liam. That's artfully as in gratefully, and Liam as in the lesser spotted character from Monarch of the Glen, who is often seen getting into entertaining scrapes. At the time of listening for this, guys, there will be some things coming up. I've done something quite nice that I'm debuting for our 62nd anniversary in November of the show, a show that I dearly love and that I don't think I'm going to have to be worried about adding too many more doctors to it for in the near future. And I am planning something very special for Christmas Day. And I won't say any more about that because I think that Mr. Reese will tell you that it'll be worth the wait. If I've done it right, it'll be worth the wait.
Next time, I'll be joined by James Lark and we'll be talking about the 1992 release of the Macra Terror cassette tape, the 1993 Doctor Who yearbook, and Harry Hill's Fruit Corner. Well, until next time, I've been Dylan.
And I have been Henry Crabb.
And this has been Doctor Who Too Hot for TV.
Too hot for TV.
Right.
When you're going to be dropping this, give me some context.
This
one.
This will be within the next 3 weeks.
Oh, fucking hell. Okay, so this is
I'm nearly at the end of the series, and I didn't.
I was going to say, your series for this is longer than the Man from U.N.C.L.'s one in the 1960s.
I told you I didn't want to do it anymore, and then you were like, Axel, I'm not doing it. And I was like, oh, we should do it. And then you did the what if, and I was like, okay, fine.
The what if? I was stunned you'd never done that before.
Well, I was thinking about doing it.
But, I mean, I know it's a article, but I mean, fucking hell. I would say that was one of the cornerstones of the 90s for me.
Well, we'll get into that.
Yeah, go for it.